Welcome back to One Up the Annals, where shame becomes legend, and where brilliance sometimes burns itself alive trying to prove it's real. I'm your host, Rob Greason. Tonight's story isn't about scandal or sin. It's about the thin, volatile space between creation and collapse, the atomic field where obsession becomes art, and that art asks for everything in return. The place where genius lives like a live wire, too bright to touch, too dangerous to turn off. This is the story of Heath Ledger. A boy who left Perth, Australia with change in his pocket and a camera's worth of dreams, and somehow rewrote the DNA of modern acting. A man who loved the craft more than the crown, and he loved harder, worked faster, and thought deeper than his body could handle. A mind that split the atom of performance and couldn't survive the fallout and left one hell of an afterglow. Remember, this isn't a ghost story. It's not about a role that killed him or a curse that crawled out of a comic book. It's about the biology of brilliance, a restless machine that ran past the limit, and the man who lost how to hit the brakes because art felt better than sleep. If you came for conspiracy, you'll be disappointed. If you came for truth, well then buckle in, because tonight we open the scroll on Heath Ledger, the restless atom, the director who never got to finish his own film, and the artist who taught the world that genius doesn't always end in madness. Sometimes it just ends. Now before we roll the reel, here's the Operation Cover Your Ass disclaimer. I'm not a biographer, a psychologist, or a coroner of culture. I'm a storyteller doing my best to trace a man's brilliance without staining it. Every fact I've used comes from credible sources, but I'm still human. If I miss a beat or I get a detail wrong, the intent was never disrespect. Because I respect this man deeply, I want to do his story justice, not to glorify a tragedy, but to learn from it. Consider this a cautionary tale about the cost of relentless creation, and a tribute to an artist whose restlessness built worlds and burned through them at the same time. Take this as an act of reverence, not rumor. What follows isn't about how he died, it's about how he fiercely lived, and what it cost to chase perfection past the point of sleep. The legend, the best Joker ever, and the man whose smile made me believe the world was still okay. Heath Ledger. Let's go. Act 1. The Boy Who Couldn't Idle. Perth, Western Australia. A city stretched between desert and ocean, where horizons are so wide they trick you into thinking there's always more out there. In one little house near Guildford Grammar School, there was a boy who couldn't stop performing. He'd spin through the living room, dance across the kitchen tiles, turn dinner conversation into dialogue. His sister Kate was his first co-star. Together, they staged living room plays with curtains made from bed sheets and audiences made of stuffed animals. If there was music playing, Heath was dancing. If there wasn't, he made his own. His mother Sally taught language and stories. His father Kim tuned engines. From her, he learned rhythm. From him, precision. And somewhere between grammar and Greece, a performer was born. At 10, he took the stage as Peter Pan. It wasn't his first performance, but it was his ignition. He'd rehearse after school, adjusting lines, choreographing the sword fights, asking teachers about lighting cues like a tiny director in sneakers. When the curtain fell, the applause hit him like oxygen. From that moment on, he was ruined, because once you felt a room disappear around you, you start chasing that vanish like a drug. By 14, he was choreographing dances inspired by Singing in the Rain, winning local competitions, and studying Gene Kelly's footwork frame by frame on VHS. At Guildford Grammar School, he'd mimic staff voices, rewrite play lines mid-rehearsal, and spend lunch breaks filming mock commercials on a borrowed camcorder. He didn't dream of fame. He dreamed of motion. When he turned 16, the motion got bigger. He and a friend packed a car, pointed the hood towards Sydney, 2,500 miles of dust and bad radio. He wasn't running to fame, he was fleeing gravity. Sydney didn't welcome him with lights, just auditions, shared flats, and the smell of cheap ramen noodles. But he threw himself into every role the city offered. A soap, a thriller, a low-budget film about broken teenagers. When offered 2 parts, a clean-cut swimmer or a gay cyclist, he chose the one guaranteed to make people squirm because it was more of an acting role. Because comfort never made anyone interesting. Between jobs, he sketched, photographed, edited, learned lenses. He was already thinking like a director, already restless enough to make a creation a compulsion. What looked like ambition was really obsession with somewhere to go. Then, 1999 hit. 2 Hands in Australia, 10 Things I Hate About You in Hollywood. 2 worlds, 1 kid, still no brakes to slow him down. Heath called himself a fraud. Success only made him nervous. He once told a friend he was terrified of being found out. That fear became fuel, and fuel became fire. Heath Ledger wasn't looking for celebrity. He was testing combustion and earning recognition. A performer who'd been dancing since he could walk, now burning in front of cameras that finally noticed the light. Act 2. The stretch to depth. By the turn of the millennium, Heath Ledger wasn't chasing auditions anymore. The industry was chasing him. The Patriot, A Knight's Tale, Monsters Ball, The Four Feathers, Ned Kelly. Each role was another attempt to outrun the fear that he'd somehow been lucky, that sooner or later someone would realize he didn't belong. He once called himself a nervous wreck before every shoot. That wasn't false humility, it was the motor behind everything. He'd study, obsess, memorize, and then walk on the set grinning like none of it mattered. But his friends said you could see the energy shaking off him, as if the body was constantly processing 1,000 frames per second. Then came 2005, and with it, the performance that silenced every doubt, Brokeback Mountain. Ang Lee wanted someone who could communicate entire histories through silence. Heath didn't just deliver that, he carved it into film. The first thing people noticed was his stillness, the restraint. The man who once danced across stages in Perth now moved like a mountain, slow, deliberate, and heartbreakingly human. Ang Lee called him a man who could express an ocean through a single movement. But that came at a cost. Heath had to smother his own restless energy to reach it. His natural state was kinetic, talking fast, bouncing between ideas, sketching, photography, thinking out loud. For Brokeback, he had to compress all that into Ennis Del Mar, a man who barely spoke, who bottled every feeling until it choked him. There's a myth that genius always announces itself with fireworks. For Heath Ledger, it came as a whisper, up on a mountain behind a clenched jaw, in a man who barely spoke. Ennis Del Mar in Brokeback Mountain, a character so closed off it was as if emotion itself had to crawl out of his throat just to breathe. But on set, something extraordinary happened. Heath didn't just perform Ennis, he became the quiet. He practiced silence like it was a language. He'd stand alone outside between takes, rolling a cigarette he never lit, mumbling lines under his breath until the sound disappeared completely. Director Ang Lee said, Heath was the only actor I didn't have to direct. He was already there, inhabiting the stillness, the restraint, the ache. Every emotion you see in that film is real because he refused to fake any of it. Up there in Alberta's cold, Heath took the physical punishment too. He refused to stunt double, rode horses until his thighs bruised. carried gear through sleet and snow. The crew said he moved like a man born in another century. And when Michelle Williams injured her knee during a sled scene, Heath didn't hesitate. He lifted her out of the snow himself and carried her down the hill. Ang Lee said later, something changed that day. You could feel it in the air. What Ang Lee felt that day wasn't just good acting or on-set chemistry. It was the exact moment fiction stepped into real life. When Michelle Williams injured her knee during that sledding scene, she cried out and went down hard in the snow. Crew members froze, unsure whether to rush in or wait for the medic. Heath, he didn't hesitate. He didn't ask, he didn't break character. He just sprinted through the snow, scooped her up in his arms, and carried her. Carefully, gently, all the way down the hill to the truck, apologizing for the weather, cracking jokes to keep her mind off the pain. Michelle later said her stomach flipped in that moment. It was instant. Something changed, I knew. The crew said the same. The whole atmosphere shifted. It was as if the story they were filming and the life unfolding behind it synced for a heartbeat, and everyone felt it. It didn't matter they were surrounded by cameras and cold and a dozen people watching. For those few minutes, it was just two humans, and one of them refusing to let the other hurt alone. That moment wasn't written in a script, but it became the beginning of a home. That was the day the movie's love story slipped into real life. But while life got louder, his art kept getting quieter. When Brokeback wrapped, Heath saw it once, at the Venice premiere, and walked out before the credits rolled. He said the performance took him to places he didn't know how to get out of. That was the fusion phase of the atom. Everything hot, everything alive, but held together by sheer will. Heath had found the power in containment, to feel everything, and show almost nothing. That's what made Ennis Del Mar so devastating. A man whose silence spoke louder than most people's screams. But there's a cost to holding fire in your hands. That kind of control, that level of emotional compression, changes the chemistry of a person. You can almost feel the internal strain when you watch him. The tension between the man and the mask. That performance earned him nominations for the Oscar, BAFTA, and Golden Globe. But it also introduced a new weight. Expectation. Heath wasn't built for celebrity. He found the noise around fame hollow. Magazine shoots, red carpet, shallow interviews. He told one reporter, "I love acting. God, I love it. But all this fame, all this attention, it's bullshit." To him, fame wasn't a reward. It was a static interrupting the signal. What the public saw as a rising star, his friends saw as a man trying to keep up with his own momentum. He wasn't sleeping much. Michelle Williams later said Heath had too much energy, too much mind. That mind would loop and spiral long after the cameras stopped rolling. Insomnia had become part of his identity, not as a quirk, but as a kind of permanent static. In an interview just months before his death, he said he was averaging maybe 2 hours of sleep a night. He blamed his mind for it, said it wouldn't shut off. Every new idea turned into another project. A song to direct, a short film to edit, a shot to try. Even at rest, he was creating. He began collaborating with musicians, directing the music video Morning Yearning for Ben Harper in 2006. Behind the camera, he found a different kind of control. One that didn't depend on pretending to be someone else. He was designing, building, experimenting. A filmmaker in training, burning through notebooks full of ideas. Around this time, Heath did something most people forget. Something that proves he wasn't unraveling, he was evolving. He helped create a production company with his close friend Matt Amato, a small creative collective called The Masses. It wasn't a vanity label or a side hobby. It was Heath's laboratory, a place where he could direct music videos, develop scripts, experiment with imagery, and build stories from the ground up without the machinery of Hollywood breathing down his neck. The people who worked there said Heath wasn't just dabbling. He was driving the creative engine, pitching concepts, editing late into the night, planning a feature inspired by Nick Drake's Pink Moon. This wasn't a man lost in a role. It was a man stepping into authorship. Acting was the spark, directing was the destination. And that shift from performer to architect was happening fast. So fast it blurred into the insomnia that followed. But there was still no off switch. Whether acting or directing, Heath was all in. And all in was starting to mean something dangerous. By the time he wrapped Candy in 2006, the story of two lovers consumed by addiction, Heath was already talking about rest. But his version of rest wasn't sleep. It was simply switching obsessions. Photography instead of film, music instead of dialogue. His creativity never stopped moving, it just changed rooms. But even when the rooms changed, his mind didn't slow. One of Heath's lifelong obsessions was chess, a game he'd been playing since he was a kid in Perth. When he moved to New York, he'd slip into Washington Square Park between shoots, sit across from old-timers who'd been hustling games for decades, and play them like he'd been born at the board. They said he'd read positions the way actors read scripts, fast, intuitive, 3 moves deeper than anyone expected. He dreamed of opening his own chess cafe someday, maybe even making a movie about the game. That was Heath. The same fire that made him act, made him analyze, calculate, obsess. He never played just to win, he played to understand the pattern. It wasn't madness, it was velocity. The mind of a man who never stopped looking for the next move of the board. He once said, "I'm not supernatural, I just can't stop." That's where the tension lives, between brilliance and burnout, between creation and collapse. The same nervous energy that made him extraordinary was beginning to strip his reserves bare. He was about to take that same relentless mind and lock it in a room with one of cinema's most chaotic characters. Not because he wanted to lose himself, but because he couldn't resist seeing how deep he could go before he hit the core. Act 3. The Echo and the Collapse. If Brokeback Mountain was the containment chamber, then The Dark Knight was the reactor. The same energy, only now unrestrained. In 2007, Heath locked himself away in a London hotel room for 6 weeks. Not to lose himself, but to build someone else entirely. He filled notebooks with chaos, clippings of hyenas, clown sketches, words that made him laugh for all the wrong reasons. Underneath in his sharp handwriting, he wrote, "Everything's a joke to him." He wanted the Joker's voice to sound like a snake pretending to smile. He'd pace the carpet, talking to himself until he found it. That half whisper, half laugh, that slithered up the throat and stayed there. When he walked out of that room, the voice was ready. The makeup too. He refused the brushwork of professionals, smeared the paint on himself, cracked it with his fingers. The Joker didn't apply makeup, he wore decay. And once that voice exited, once that frequency settled into his bones, it didn't stay politely in the rehearsal room. Hotel guests in London complained about a drunk hyena laughing through the walls at 2 a.m. Staff thought someone was having a meltdown. Heath apologized every time, tipped them, smiled sheepishly, but he couldn't stop practicing the laugh. It wasn't darkness, it was curiosity. He was testing the sound like a musician tuning a violin that wanted to bite. On set, that same energy turned into mischief. He'd slip behind cameras in full makeup and whisper jokes to crew members just to watch them jump. Sometimes he'd appear silently beside an extra, grin through cracked clown paint and say, "All right, mate," like it was the most normal greeting in the world. And the physicality, that strange, slinking movement we all remember, that wasn't choreographed. The lip smack, improvised. The tongue flick, improvised. The loose puppet-limbed walks, improvised. Heath once said he wanted the Joker to move like a marionette whose strings had been cut but didn't know it yet. And he found that movement by playing, skating around the set between takes, humming, tapping props like toys, keeping the body loose so the madness could stay elastic. Everyone who worked with him said the same thing. The man inside the makeup was gentle, warm, playful. The safest chaos they'd ever been around. Christopher Nolan said Heath would skateboard through set between takes, laughing, loose, alive. Then Nolan would call action. And the room changed temperature. The air went tight. Even Michael Caine forgot his lines the first time he turned his head and said, "Good evening, Commissioner." Gary Oldman said it best. His eyes were both alive and absent, like he was watching from two places at once. Heath treated each take like jazz, rehearsed the melody, then improvised the madness. That's how we got cinema's most iconic accidents. The jail cell clapping, completely unscripted. Just the Joker applauding the chaos he created. The nurse explosion, I love this one, was a detonator misfire. It was supposed to just go off. But Heath stayed in character, tapping the detonator like a toy until finally the blast hit. It wasn't luck, it was instinct, controlled detonation. Maggie Gyllenhaal called him gentle inside the chaos. In scenes where he cornered her as Rachel Dawes, she said she felt safe. Because Heath's danger came from craft, not cruelty. He was fully aware. That was the frightening part. It wasn't madness, it was precision pushed too far. And this is where my atomic metaphor ignites. In Brokeback, his energy fused inward, hot but stable. In Batman, the reaction went supercritical. Genius and madness, the same core. Awareness spinning faster. Electrons orbiting, breaking free. Between takes, he kept a small notebook, more sketches, half-lines, dirty jokes, absurdities. He'd read comics late at night, circle random words, test new laughs in hotel mirrors. Even Heath admitted it. My body's exhausted, but my mind keeps going. He wasn't haunted by the Joker, he was haunted by the voltage. That manic creative frequency that can't be switched off. When the film wrapped, he carried that energy home. Still sketching, still photographing, still planning his directorial debut. But inside, the charge had nowhere left to go. Nolan later said, he didn't descend into madness, he transcended the role. But every transcendence has a cost. The same force that turned him into art's most magnetic villain was tearing through the man beneath the mask. That's the line everyone talks about. The thin one between genius and madness, but it was never a line at all. It was an atom splitting. That's the core right there, not a line, but an unstable nucleus where creation and collapse begin to orbit too close. When genius spins at that speed, it becomes its own element, volatile, glowing, dangerous to touch. Heath didn't fall through that barrier, he split the atom and stared into the flash. He walked away radiant, thinking he contained it. But every detonation leaves an echo, and that echo followed him home. After he died, the headlines wrote the easier story. They said the Joker took him, that he couldn't crawl back out of the makeup. It's a comforting lie, the one that says art is worth dying for, but the truth is quieter. On set, he was laughing, skating, calling Nolan mate. Christian Bale swore he could drop the mask between takes like a magician palming a card. His sister Kate said the role didn't haunt him, it thrilled him. He wasn't lost inside the Joker, he simply couldn't find rest once the applause began. The world mistook exhaustion for possession. It wasn't madness that killed him, it was precision that went too far. And for all the voltage he carried, for all the chaos he could conjure with a tilt of his head, there was a gentleness about Heath that surprised everyone who met him. Extras. People expected to be ignored, said Heath learned their names within a day. He'd skate past them between takes, point at their costumes and say, "Look at you, you're stealing the whole scene, mate." I'm not going to try the Australian accent, forgive me. One background actor remembered standing nervously near a stunt explosion setup. Heath walked over, bumped him with his shoulder and said, "If it blows up wrong, just blame me." The crew said the same thing. He thanked makeup artists every morning, apologized when scenes ran long, chatted with camera assistants about lenses like he was the intern, not the star. In the middle of the biggest blockbuster of its decade, Heath Ledger behaved like the most grounded man on set. A storm in the work, a soft wind in the spaces between. When a star burns too hot, it doesn't explode right away. It folds inward, quietly, until its own gravity starts to crush the core. That's where we pick up next. Act 4, The Collapse, the biology of exhaustion. By late 2007, Heath Ledger was filming the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus in London. Outside, snow. Inside, a fever. Walking pneumonia, they called it. He coughed between takes, apologized, kept shooting. He still couldn't sleep. He joked about it, the way exhausted people do when they can't admit they're breaking. The insomnia that once fed his imagination had turned predatory. To calm it, he mixed prescriptions. Painkillers for the infection, sedatives for the mind, anti-anxiety meds for the racing thoughts. Each one made sense, each pill a promise of rest that never came. Together, they built a chemical equation with no margin for error. January 22nd, 2008, New York City, Broome Street. A massage appointment, a locked door, a silence that won't answer. The medical examiner's report reads like an autopsy of exhaustion. Acute intoxication from oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, and diloxamine. 6 drugs, 1 intention: sleep. The result? Stillness. Not suicide, not the Joker. Just a body that finally obeyed the command to rest. This isn't a story about drug addiction. This is a story about brilliance, addicted to perfectionism, where exhaustion was simply ambition in disguise. That's the cruel symmetry. He could choreograph chaos on screen, improvise explosions, turn mistakes into masterpieces. But he could never choreograph peace. He mastered everything except off. Nolan said he was having the most fun of his career. Ben Harper called him a river too wide for one lifetime. Both were right. Genius didn't consume him, exhaustion did. The same energy that built universes simply ran out of atoms to burn. Ledger's death was a cautionary tale, and physics. Energy, without rest, finds its limit. And when the core collapses, what's left is light. Act 5. The immortal particle. Every atom that splits leaves something behind. Not just destruction, but illumination. For Heath Ledger, that light still travels. The Dark Knight premiered 6 months after his death. Theaters filled with a silence you could feel in your ribs, the kind that comes before confession. When the credits rolled, nobody moved. They had witnessed something more than performance, a transmission. Ledger's Joker wasn't a villain, he was entropy with a pulse. And audiences understood, instinctively, that the man who gave it life had given all of himself. Awards followed: Oscar, BAFTA, Golden Globe, SAG. His parents and sister stood on the Academy stage, trembling under the weight of applause meant for an absence. They accepted on behalf of his daughter. Kim Ledger said, "This award tonight would have humbly validated Heath's quiet determination to be truly accepted by you all." It did more than validate him, it immortalized him. But the legacy isn't the gold statue. It's what his work changed. After Ledger, villains had to be human, heroes had to be flawed, and actors had to reconsider what method meant. He reset the cultural bar for authenticity. You can see his fingerprints in Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, in every dark-hearted anti-hero who followed. Echoes of the same experiment in chaos, the same fearless empathy. Beyond acting, the wave continued. In 2008, the Australians and Film Foundation created the Heath Ledger Scholarship, funding young actors who dare to cross oceans the way he did, with change in his pocket and conviction. Winners call it a lifeline. Heath would have called it a start. And the man himself? He's still here. In outtakes and behind-the-scenes laughter, in the stories every crew member tells about his kindness. The myth was that darkness consumed him, that his light was simply brighter than his body could carry. When a reactor goes critical, the elements scatter. Some decay, some endure. Ledger's energy endures. Every frame he left behind still hums with it. Every young artist who studies his work becomes a particle of that afterglow. Heath Andrew Ledger, born of motion, felled by exhaustion, remembered as light. He proved that genius isn't measured by longevity, it's measured by luminosity. And his hasn't dimmed. Some stars die, others simply change form. Heath's star never stopped burning. His family always said the same thing. He wasn't tormented. He wasn't drowning. He was exhausted. And the world mistook exhaustion for tragedy. And that's what he never wanted. What everyone who loved him has said again and again, he wasn't the myth. He wasn't the darkness. He was a man who loved the work too much to turn it off. This is the part the world forgets. Not the Joker, not the Oscars, not the myth. Heath Ledger was kind. He was playful. He was generous with his light. And in the end, that's what stays with everyone who knew him. Not the chaos he could conjure, but the gentleness he carried when the cameras stopped. There are actors who perform, and there are the few who bleed through the screen. Heath Ledger was the latter, a rare kind of furnace that made art out of voltage. He wasn't consumed by madness. He was consumed by motion, a restless current that refused to idle, even when the work was done. And when that current finally met the human limit, the world mistook the fallout for tragedy, when it was really the cost of carrying too much brilliance in one small body. He is the proof of the metaphor, the living atom where genius and madness share the same orbit, separated only by awareness and the desperate need to stay awake long enough to finish what you love. He wasn't the Joker, he wasn't Ennis Del Mar. He was a man who built worlds out of electricity and lost how to turn off the power. And that power burns eternally in his memory now. He left us a reminder that the same spark that creates can also consume. And that rest is not surrender, it's survival. I'm your host, Rab Greason, and this was One Up the Annals, Genius and Madness, where the fusion of creativity and chaos become legend. Next up, a man who made the world laugh until it cried, who battled his own demons behind 1,000 voices. Robin Williams, Nanu Nanu. The comic supernova who turned kindness into performance, and performance into escape. Because in the annals of obsession, every genius burns differently. Where genius becomes legend, I came for the story, you stayed for the truth, and now it lives in the annals. Good night.